Who am I? Who's my issues more? Well, who are my issues more with? My issues with the in regards to the inghams, who are my issues more with? I think more Chris than Sarah. So also this is like a follow-on video from the one I did this morning. I was talking a bit about how I dislike the way that Chris and Sarah speak to people. More so Chris than obviously Sarah, I would say, because it's more Chris who speaks to people like that. It's more, it's him that's the one, who thinks it's okay to call people clowns, dumbasses, pussies, things like that. Like yesterday, for instance, on yesterday's vlog, I was reading the comments, and he responded to somebody calling him a dumbass, saying, they've got, and they start rating dumbass, in being dumbass, or something like that, And there was even iFam who were actually applauding Chris for the way that he'd spoken to that person, and that's what really wound me up, was the fact that Chris had spoken to that person in that way, and the iFam was saying, well done to him for speaking to someone like that, because regardless of what anybody says, it's not okay for him to be speaking to people like that. The problem with Chris is he's always trying to be some sort of wannabe gangster. That's what he's trying to be. And he needs to stop trying to be a wannabe gangster, as it doesn't look good. I don't know of many people who think it's okay to respond to somebody like that. I'm not, as I said in my earlier video, I'm not saying that they don't have a right to, to respond to negative comments or anything like that. But what I'm trying to say is there is a more appropriate way for him to respond to negative comments that doesn't involve him calling somebody a clown, a pussy, or something like that. It's quite offensive, him, saying things like that, And I just wish that he would be taught a valuable lesson about keeping his mouth shut. To be honest, he deserves a smack in the mouth for speaking to people like that. He deserves, someone should knock his fucking block off for speaking to people like that. But, I'm not going to defend some tosser who thinks it's okay to respond to, to speak to people like that, calling people clowns, pussies and dumbasses and God knows what, and people wonder why I have an issue with them. Well, it might have something to do with the fact they think it's okay to speak to people like that. More Chris than Sarah. Sarah doesn't really say things like that, it's more Chris, as he's the one that's trying to be a wannabe gangster. Not that it, which isn't a good look for him, per se. I just don't know what to say, it doesn't feel like there is anything I can say about it that I haven't already said, other than it's just unacceptable for him to be responding to people the way that he is, and I think anybody with an ounce of common sense would say it's not okay for him to be, for him to respond to negative comments in that way. I've always said there is a more appropriate way to respond to negative comments that doesn't involve calling somebody a rat pussy or something like that. It's just disgusting the way he speaks to people. Like they speak to people like a bit of dirt they've trodden in. That's the way they're speaking to people. They're basically speaking to people like a piece of shit they've just trodden in, and it's disgusting. And it's completely and utterly out of order. Like he shouldn't be speaking to people like that. It's not right for him to be saying that to someone. For him to be responding to somebody like that. It's never okay to say that to someone. But yeah, he seems to think it is. He seems to think it is okay for him to say things like that. And it really isn't. It's not okay for him to be responding to people like that, calling them clowns and rat pussies and God knows what else. I can't defend somebody who thinks it's okay to say things like that. to speak to people like that and respond to comments in that way. I'm not prepared to do that. I'm not prepared to stick up for somebody who's speaking to people like that. I'm not here to do that. I'm not here to applaud him for the fact that he's speaking to people like completely not a dog crap. I'm not down for that. I'm not down for defending somebody who thinks it's okay to respond to comments like that. I mean, how many social media influencers do you know respond to negative comments like that? I don't know hardly any any kind of social media influencers who respond to comments like that. But he does. He's trying to act like some wannabe gangster or some Andrew Tate wannabe. Calling people clowns and dumbasses and God knows what. The fact that he thinks it's acceptable to speak to people like that is just absolutely shocking. This is a man he was supposed to be a social media influencer, yet he thinks it's okay to speak to people like that. He thinks it's okay to call people clowns, dumbasses, and fools and morons and God knows what. This is a big part of the reason why I've been giving them so much grief, because I've had enough. I've had enough of them and the way they speak to people and the way they treat people. They treat people and they speak to people like a piece of shit they've just trodden in on the street. That's how they speak to people, and that's the way they treat people. It's the way that's the way they treat the people and speak to the people who don't necessarily agree with what they do. They don't like the fact that there are people out there who don't agree with what they do or don't or have an issue with them for whatever the reason might be. But regardless, at the end of the day, regardless of what people think of them or what people's opinions are of them, doesn't mean that the person's not entitled to respect. Because they're absolutely entitled to that. They're absolutely entitled to respect. It's not right that Chris is speaking to people like this. It's not right that Chris keeps doing this and keeps saying this. It's just horrendous. It's just horrendous, absolutely horrendous. There's nothing good to say about the way that Chris Ingham speaks to people. It's just appalling, and it's disgusting. There's nothing good I can say. How can I speak positively about someone who thinks it's okay to call people clowns and morons and clowns and pussies and dumbasses and God knows what else? I'm not going to applaud somebody who speaks to people like that. But, I'm not going to applaud anyone for speaking to people like that. It's wrong. At the end of the day, why would I applaud somebody for speaking to people like that? What sort of person would that make me if I was applauding somebody who thinks it's okay to speak to people like that? It's just ridiculous. And of course the IFAM will say that he has every right to call people clowns and dumbasses and God knows what else. Of course they will. They won't say that it's not right for him to be speaking to people like that. They'll say that he has every right to speak to people like that. They'll say that Chris isn't doing anything wrong by speaking to people like that. But he speaks to people like that online. But would he really respond to people like that on the street? Would he respond to somebody like that in the street? Would he say that to somebody? Would he say that to somebody? Would he actually have the balls to actually say that to someone? Tell them that say something like that. Well, I bet he wouldn't. I bet he wouldn't. He probably wouldn't have the balls to say it, to say that to someone. But he's got the balls to say it online. Because he knows the people aren't that near him. But if he said that to somebody in the street, called somebody a clown, or called somebody a dumbass or something like that, they would knock his fucking block off. They would give him a smack in the mouth. They wouldn't hesitate to give him a smack in the mouth. I mean, this is, we are talking about the guy who was quoted as saying that if somebody spoke to him in the street the same way they do online, they would let a smack in the mouth. And that would see him get done for assault if he did that, wouldn't it? The guy, Chris is just a moron. Like, what else? As I said, what else am I supposed to say about a man who thinks it's okay to speak to people like that, and say the things that he says? Because regardless of what people say, or regardless of what people have to say, it still doesn't give him a right, to all people clowns and fools and clowns and pussies and things like that. There's still no excuses for that. There's no. There's no. It doesn't make that doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it acceptable for him to say things like that to people. It doesn't make it okay for him to respond to negative comments in that way. And it never will. It never ever will. He will end up, as I said, he will end up saying that to the wrong person one day, and and that person will teach him a very valuable lesson on why it's best to keep your mouth shut instead of running your mouth off. It's about time he learnt the importance of keeping his flipping gob shut. Instead of running his mouth, calling people all the names, all the lovely names. It's about time he learnt that some people will knock his block off if he says a certain thing. He needs to learn that people aren't just going to turn a blind eye to the fact that he's calling them clowns and morons and God knows what else. People shouldn't be expected to turn a blind eye to that. People shouldn't be expected to just ignore that. But they will be expected to ignore that. They will be expected to turn a blind eye to that. They will be expected to just, accept what put up with that. But nobody should have to put up with that. It's not right that he thinks it's okay to respond to comments like that in that way. It really isn't. It's just completely and utterly wrong, completely and utterly unacceptable. And he needs to be taught a very, people like him deserve to be taught a lesson. As I said, one day he'll say that to the wrong person. He'll say the wrong person, a clown or a dumbass, and that will come back to bite him on the backside. And I hope it does. Because it's the least he deserves. If he thinks it's okay to respond to people like that, then he deserves what he gets. He deserves to be smacked. He deserves a smack in the mouth. I wouldn't normally say that, but for Chris Ingham, I'm perfectly willing to make an exception. When somebody's saying things like that, people are not just going to turn a blind eye to that and ignore the fact that he says things like that. People won't hesitate to give him a smack in the fucking mouth, and that's the least he deserves. What he deserves is a good old-fashioned smack in the mouth. He deserves to be taught that being disrespectful to people has consequences. And he deserves to be taught a valuable lesson on the meaning of fucking respect. The guy's a dickhead. Simple as that. He's an absolute dickhead in every sense of the word. And I'm not going to apologise for the fact I have that opinion. Someone had to say Chris Ingham is a village dickhead. And the sooner people start realising that, the better. This is why I despise them so much. It's the way they speak to people. They shouldn't be allowed to keep speaking to people like that. They shouldn't be allowed to keep getting away with speaking to people like that. It's about time that they realise that it's about time that he faced consequences for speaking to somebody like that, for calling someone a dumbass or a clown or something like that. it's about time he realised that it's about time that he learned that he realised that not everyone is going to turn a blind eye to that. Not everybody is going to ignore the fact that he's taught them something like that. There are people out there who aren't just going to turn a blind eye to the fact that he's calling them a clown or a dumbass or something like that. There are people out there who are not just going to ignore the fact that he's speaking to them like that. He needs to be careful, because one day the things he says will end up having serious consequences. And I hope they do. I hope that he does get what he deserves at some point, one day. I would never normally wish that on anyone. But for people like him, I'm willing to make an exception. Because it's about time they learned that being kind of disrespectful to people does end up having consequences. And does end up, does end up having, he will end up paying a price. It's times when I see him responding to comments like that, I just think to myself, like, he really deserves a smack in the mouth. It's just as simple as that. I don't know what else to say. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video anyway, and I'll see you for another one soon. Bye bye.